Years ago, a man was traveling through the mountains of Switzerland as night began to fall. With no place to stay, he approached a farmhouse and asked the farmer if he might spend the night. The farmer agreed. "You can sleep in the barn," he said. As the man headed to the barn, the farmer's daughter asked her father, "Who's that man?" "Just a traveler," said the farmer. "Needed a place to rest, so I let him use the barn." The daughter thought for a moment and said, "Maybe he's hungry." She prepared a plate of food and took it out to him. An hour later, she returned with straw in her hair and her dress slightly askew, heading straight to bed without a word. The farmer's wife, noticing her daughter's state, remarked, "Maybe he's thirsty." She grabbed a bottle of wine and went to the barn. An hour later, she returned, her blouse buttoned incorrectly and lipstick smudged, and also went straight to bed. The next morning at sunrise, the man left, waving politely to the farmer as he walked up the mountain path. When the daughter awoke and realized the man was gone, she burst into tears. "How could he just leave without saying goodbye?" she cried. "We shared such a passionate night together." The farmer, furious, stormed outside, spotted the man halfway up the mountain, and shouted, "Hey! You slept with my daughter!" The man turned, cupped his hands around his mouth, and called back, "Laid the oldie, too!" A big city lawyer was hired to represent the railroad in a lawsuit filed by an old rancher. The rancher claimed the railroad owed him compensation because his prized bull had gone missing near the tracks. All he wanted was fair payment for his loss. The case was set to be heard in the back room of the local general store with the justice of the peace presiding. Before the trial began, the railroad lawyer approached the rancher and tried to settle out of court. Using all his persuasive skills, he eventually convinced the rancher to accept half the amount he was asking for. The rancher signed the settlement papers and walked out with a check. Feeling smug about his victory, the lawyer couldn't resist rubbing it in. "You know, old-timer," he said, "I hate to break it to you, but I completely bluffed you. I couldn't have won that case. The train engineer was asleep, the fireman was in the caboose, and I didn't have a single witness. I tricked you into settling." The rancher tipped his hat, smiled, and replied, "Well, I'll tell you what, son. I was a bit worried about the case myself, since my bull wandered back home this morning." On a particularly windy day, a rabbi was walking along when a strong gust blew his hat right off his head. The rabbi chased after it, but the wind was too strong, sending the hat tumbling farther and farther away. A young non-Jewish man saw what happened, sprinted after the hat, and managed to catch it. He returned it to the rabbi, who was so grateful he handed the young man $20 and blessed him. Feeling lucky, the young man decided to take the $20 to the racetrack. With the rabbi's blessing in mind, he checked the program and placed the entire amount on a horse. Later that evening, he recounted the story to his father. "At the 5th race, I noticed a horse named Top Hat with 100-to-1 odds. I figured with the rabbi's blessing, I couldn't lose, so I bet all $20 on him. And guess what? Top Hat won." "Wow," said his father. "What happened next?" "In the next race, there was a horse named Bowler at 30-to-1. I put all my winnings on Bowler, and he won, too." "Incredible. So, did you bring home the money?" the father asked. "No," said the son. "I lost it all in the last race. I saw a horse named Chateau, and since Chateau means hat in French, I figured he was a sure thing, so I bet everything on him." "You idiot!" exclaimed his father. "Chateau means castle, not hat. So who won the race?" The son sighed and said, "A real long shot. Some Spanish horse named Sombrero." A young man named Joe buys a horse from a farmer for $250. The farmer agrees to deliver the horse in a few days. A couple of days later, the farmer shows up and says, "I got some bad news, son. The horse died." Joe replies, "Well then, just give me my money back." The farmer sighs and says, "Can't do that. I've already spent it." Joe thinks for a moment and says, "All right then, just bring me the dead horse." The farmer looks confused. "What are you going to do with a dead horse?" Joe smiles. "I'm going to raffle him off." The farmer laughs. "You can't raffle off a dead horse?" Joe says, "Sure I can. Watch me. I just won't tell anyone he's dead." A month later, the farmer runs into Joe again and asks, "So how'd the raffle go with that dead horse?" Joe grins. "I sold 500 tickets at $5 each and made a profit of $2,495. The farmer is shocked. "Didn't anyone complain?" Joe shrugs. "Just the guy who won, so I gave him his $5 back." Two hillbillies walk into a restaurant. While enjoying their meal, they start chatting about their moonshine operation. Nearby, a woman eating a sandwich suddenly begins to choke. At first, she coughs quietly, but soon it's clear she's in serious trouble. One of the hillbillies notices and says to her, "Can you swaller?" The woman shakes her head frantically, "No." "Can you breathe?" he asks. Now turning blue, the woman again shakes her head, "No." Without hesitation, the hillbilly gets up, walks over, lifts up her dress, yanks down her underwear, and gives her right butt cheek a big old lick. The woman is so shocked that she has a violent spasm and the obstruction flies out of her throat. Gasping for air, she begins to breathe normally again. Calmly, the hillbilly strolls back to his table. His buddy, wide-eyed, says, "Well, I'll be. I heard of that there Hindlick maneuver, but I ain't never seen nobody do it." An extraordinarily handsome man decided that it was his God-given duty to marry the perfect woman and have children of unmatched beauty. After a long search up and down the East Coast, he finally headed west. There, he met a farmer with 3 stunning, gorgeous daughters who left him in awe. He explained his mission to the farmer and asked for permission to marry one of his daughters. The farmer replied, "They're all looking to get married, so you've come to the right place. Take a look and pick the one you want." The man first dated the oldest daughter. The next day, the farmer asked him for his opinion. "Well," the man said, "she's just a little, well, not that you could really notice, but she's a bit pigeon-toed." The farmer nodded and suggested he try the second daughter. The next day, the farmer again asked how the date went. "Well," the man replied, "she's just a little, not that you could really tell, but she's kind of cross-eyed." The farmer nodded again and suggested the man try the third daughter. The next morning, the man burst in and said, "She's perfect, absolutely perfect. She's the one I want to marry." So they married right away. Months later, the baby was born. The man rushed to the nursery, horrified to find that the baby, while cute, had the ugliest face he had ever seen. Panicked, he rushed to his father-in-law and asked, "How could this happen, with both of us being so handsome?" The farmer shrugged and said, "Well, she was just a little, not that you could hardly tell, pregnant when you met her." A man was driving past a farm when he spotted a beautiful horse in one of the fields. Eager to buy it, he stopped and offered the farmer $500 for the horse. The farmer replied, "Sorry, he's not for sale. He doesn't look too good." The man, still wanting the horse, raised his offer to $1,000. The farmer again declined, saying, "Sorry, he's not for sale. He doesn't look too good." Determined to buy the horse, the man upped his offer to $1,500. The farmer finally agreed. "Well, he doesn't look too good, but if you want him that badly, he's yours." The man bought the horse and took him home. The next day, furious, he stormed back to the farm. "Hey, you cheated me! You sold me a blind horse!" he yelled. The farmer calmly responded, "I told you he didn't look too good, didn't I?" A reporter hears about a woman in his town who receives the highest welfare payments, and he's curious as to why. So he visits her house to interview her. When she opens the door, he introduces himself and asks, "How old are you?" 27, she replies. "And how many children do you have?" he asks. 10, she answers. "Wow, okay, that explains a lot," the reporter says, surprised. "And what are their names?" "Well, there's Bob, then Bob, and Bob, and of course Bob." "Wait a minute, are they all named Bob?" the reporter asks, bewildered. "Yes," she says calmly. "That way, if I want them to come inside from playing, I just call Bob and they all come running." The reporter is even more confused. Okay, but what if you want them to come to the table for dinner? I just call out, Bob, come eat your dinner, and they all come, she says. But what if you want just one of them to do something? The reporter asks, now completely puzzled. She grins and says, oh, that's easy. I just used their last name. As fall arrived on a remote reservation, the Native American tribe asked their new chief what the coming winter would be like. The modern-day chief, having never learned the ancient ways, couldn't tell by the sky what the winter would bring. Thinking it better to be safe than sorry, he told his people to stock up on firewood just in case. A few days later, the chief got an idea. He went to the phone booth and called the National Weather Service. Is the coming winter going to be cold? He asked. Yes, the meteorologist replied. It looks like this winter is going to be quite cold. So the chief told his tribe to collect even more firewood to be prepared. A week later, the chief called again. Is it still going to be a very cold winter? He asked. Yes, the weatherman replied. It's going to be a very cold winter. The chief went back to his people and ordered them to gather every scrap of firewood they could find. 2 weeks later, the chief called once more. Are you absolutely sure the winter is going to be very cold? He asked. Absolutely, the weatherman assured him. It's looking more and more like it's going to be one of the coldest winters ever. The chief was curious. How can you be so sure? The weatherman replied, well, the Native Americans are collecting firewood like crazy. A farmer had just bought a new rooster to mate with his hens, and the old rooster, who had been around for many years, was worried he'd be replaced. But the old rooster had a clever idea for how to deal with the new rival. He approached the younger rooster and said, let's make a deal. We'll race around the farmhouse, 1 lap. If you win, I'll leave. If I win, you leave. The young rooster, confident in his speed, agreed. But Diko, the old rooster added, since I'm much older, you'll have to wait until I've completed half the lap before you start. That way, I have a fair chance. The young rooster, certain he could win even with that head start, agreed to the terms. The race began. The older rooster waddled off, and by the halfway point, he was already out of breath. The young rooster, sprinting like a rocket, quickly closed the gap. By the time the older rooster was at the 3/4 mark, he was nearly gasping for air, with the younger rooster just seconds away from passing him. Suddenly, bam! The farmer's shotgun rang out, and the young rooster collapsed in a heap of feathers. Darn, the farmer sighed. 3rd gay rooster this month. A little girl wanted to take her dog, Lulu, for a walk. She asked her mom, can I take Lulu around the block? Her mom replied, no, sweetheart. Lulu's in heat. Confused, the girl asked, what does that mean? Her mom, busy with chores, said, go ask your dad. He's in the garage. So the girl went to the garage and asked, Dad, I want to take Lulu for a walk, but Mom says she's in heat. What does that mean? Her dad thought for a moment, grabbed an old rag, poured some gasoline on it, and rubbed Lulu's backside. This will mask the scent, he said. Now you can take her for a walk, but don't let her off the leash. The little girl skipped off happily with Lulu trotting beside her. About 10 minutes later, she came back holding an empty leash. Her dad, startled, asked, where's Lulu? She ran out of gas halfway around the block, the girl said cheerfully, so the neighbor's dog is pushing her home. A rabbit was sitting in his garden, sipping Earl Grey from his favorite cup, when an old friend showed up. Please come back to the community, the friend pleaded. The rabbit sighed. I'm sorry, but I don't believe anymore. The friend, growing desperate, grabbed the rabbit by the arm and tugged. Come on, we need you back at the synagogue. You used to lead us. You were the best. The rabbit nearly dropped his cup, but caught it just in time. Careful, he snapped. You almost made me spill my tea. Frustrated, the friend threw up his hands and stormed off. The rabbit's wife, who had overheard the commotion, stepped outside. What was all that about? She asked. The rabbit took a calm sip of his tea and replied, he wanted me to lead the synagogue again, but to do that I would have had to drop the tea. 3 men met on a nude beach. 2 of them seemed happy, but the third looked rather down. Striking up a conversation, they began talking about their jobs and why they were at the beach. I'm a construction worker, said the first man. "I spend all day in the blazing sun wearing heavy clothes. Coming here, I can finally relax. No clothes, no problem." "I'm an accountant," said the second man. "I like how everyone here is dressed exactly the same. Makes things nice and simple." They turned to the third man, who still looked glum. "What about you?" they asked. "Why are you here?" The third man sighed. "My doctor sent me," he said. "I'm a pickpocket." A few days before Valentine's Day, a young woman woke up from an afternoon nap and excitedly told her husband, "I just dreamed that you gave me a pearl necklace for Valentine's Day. What do you think it means?" Her husband smiled knowingly. "Oh, I think you'll find out later tonight," he said with a wink. She squealed with joy and spent the rest of the day in eager anticipation. That evening, her husband came home holding a small, beautifully wrapped package. Her heart raced as she tore it open, only to find a book titled The Meaning of Dreams. On their wedding night, a woman nervously confided in her mother about a fear she had. "Mom, I'm worried about Bob. What if, I'm a little too big down there. He might notice and be disappointed." Her mom chuckled knowingly and said, "Oh, sweetheart, it's fine. It runs in the family. Do what I did with your dad. Go to the store, buy some beef liver, and, well, use it to make things feel just right. Trust me, it worked like a charm." Feeling relieved, she took her mother's advice. That night, she and Bob shared an incredible evening, passionate, loving, and unforgettable. She woke up the next morning feeling on top of the world, but Bob was already gone. On the nightstand, she found a note. "Good morning, my love. Last night was the most amazing experience of my life. You are truly my everything. I'm off working overtime to save for our dream home by the beach where we'll raise a family and grow old together. I can't wait to hold you again tonight. Forever yours, Bob. P.S. Your liver is in the sink." A sign in a restaurant window reads, "If you order it and we don't have it, you instantly win $1 million. Intrigued, a man walks in, sits down, and smugly says, "I'll have white rhinoceros stew." The waiter nods and disappears into the kitchen. To the man's shock, he returns with a steaming bowl of exactly that. Frustrated, the man eats the pricey meal, pays, and leaves. Determined, he comes back the next day. This time, he confidently orders bullet ants stuffed with dolphin meat. Again, the waiter promptly delivers the bizarre dish. Once more, the man grudgingly eats, pays, and storms out. On the third day, he walks in ready to claim his prize. With a sly grin, he orders a lactating mermaid breast sandwich. The waiter vanishes into the back, then returns a few minutes later with 2 large duffel bags containing $1 million. The man leaps up, ecstatic. "Hiya! I knew it! You don't have a mermaid breast!" The waiter smiles politely and says, "Oh, we do, sir. We just ran out of bread." Oh. One morning, a married couple is lying in bed when the wife turns to her husband and says, "Maybe you shouldn't go to work today." The husband, confused, replies, "What do you mean? Why shouldn't I go to work?" "I just think you've been working too hard," the wife explains. "Maybe you should take a few days off, pack a suitcase, and stay with a friend to relax." The husband pauses, then thinks, well, she's probably right. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, he quickly gets up, gets dressed, and starts packing a bag. As he folds his clothes, he asks, curiously, "Just out of interest, how did you know I've been working too hard?" His wife replies, "Because you were dreaming about work all night." The husband looks puzzled. "Really? How do you know I was dreaming about work?" The wife glares at him and says, "Because every 2 minutes you were shouting your secretary's name." A large bus pulls up at a roadside diner, and a crowd of passengers streams inside. As they settle into their seats, the driver pulls the manager aside. "Driver, listen, these folks are from the mental asylum down the road. I'm taking them out for a little trip. Here's the thing, they'll insist on paying with bottle caps, like they do back at the asylum. Please just humor them. I'll settle the entire bill when we're done." The manager nods, a bit puzzled, but agrees. Sure enough, as each passenger finishes their meal, they approach the counter and pay with bottle caps, which the manager dutifully accepts without a word. Once everyone is back on the bus, the driver walks up to the counter. Driver, thanks so much for your understanding. It's not easy managing this group. The manager smiles and hands him the bill. The driver carefully examines it, then reaches into his pocket. Driver, great. Now do you have change for a hubcap? An elderly woman walked into a store known for its high-quality jade, but was there for something different. Woman, I'd like 7 kilograms of potatoes, please. The owner, eager to help, began packing them. Woman, oh, could you please wrap each potato individually? The owner, a bit puzzled, complied. Owner, anything else, ma'am? Woman, yes, 4 kilograms of onions, also wrapped individually. Oh, suppressing a sigh, the owner wrapped the onions one by one. Owner, anything more? Woman, yes, 7 kilograms of carrots, and of course individually wrapped. The owner's face soured, but he carried on, meticulously wrapping each carrot. Finally, he handed her the bag. Owner, will that be all, ma'am? The woman glanced at the crates behind him. Woman, what are in those crates over there? The owner, now red-faced and exasperated, replied, those are grapes, madam, and they are not for sale. It was Sunday morning, and the preacher had just wrapped up an inspiring sermon when Rick, the wealthiest man in town, stood up and asked to address the congregation. The preacher, already familiar with Rick's habit of making grand speeches, sighed and said, all right, Rick, but keep it brief. Rick smiled, stepped to the front, and cleared his throat. I remember the day I earned my very first dollar, he began. That evening, I attended a church meeting where the speaker shared stories of his humanitarian work. I had just that $1 to my name, and I faced a tough choice. Keep it for myself or give it to the cause. He paused dramatically, his voice thick with emotion. I chose to donate that dollar, every last cent, and I truly believe that act of faith is why I'm a millionaire today. The congregation murmured in awe as Rick wiped a tear from his eye. But then an elderly woman in the back stood up, squinting at him. Well, Rick, she said with a sly smile, I dare you to do it again. Wife, come on, make some tea. Husband, grumbling, stood up and started heading out the door. Wife, where are you going? Husband, to the lawyer, to get rid of you. A little while later, the husband returned home and began making tea. Wife, puzzled, asked, what happened? Did you see the lawyer? Husband replied with a smirk, yes, but it turns out the lawyer was busy washing the dishes. One day, I decided to get fancy and set up a voice password on my mobile. You know, just to feel a bit more tech-savvy. So there I was, ready to record my voice when suddenly, right in the middle of setting it up, a dog barked loudly nearby. Startled, I hit confirm by accident, and the phone saved the bark as the password. Now it's been 4 days, and I can't find that dog anywhere, and the password won't unlock. One night, a man noticed that every time he was about to be intimate with his wife, one of their 5 children would inevitably interrupt by asking for water. Frustrated by the constant disruptions, he decided to take action. The next morning, he sternly announced to the whole family, from now on, whoever asks for water at night, I'll tear them apart. Later that night, one of the children woke up feeling thirsty. As he quietly got out of bed and made his way to the kitchen, he paused when he heard unusual noises coming from his parents' room. Peeking inside, he saw his father and mother minding their own business. Terrified, the child quickly retreated to his bed, too scared to ask for water. The next morning, still shaken, the child approached his father with wide eyes and hesitantly asked, Dad, did Mom ask for water last night too? A blonde woman recently bought a new mobile phone and always carried a pair of scissors with it. Curious about her unusual habit, someone finally asked, Why do you always carry scissors with your mobile phone? The blonde woman, with a serious expression, replied, Well, if I need to cut the call after making one, where would I find scissors at that moment? That's why I always keep them with me, so I'm ready to cut the call any time. On a chilly winter night, an attractive young lady found herself stranded when her car broke down on a remote hillside. She trudged up to the nearest house, hoping for some help. The old man who lived alone in the quaint cottage was kind enough to offer her a place to stay for the night. As night fell, the old man gave her a modest blanket to use. The young woman, shivering from the cold, wrapped herself up but quickly found that the blanket was far too small. "This blanket is ridiculous," she said. "If I cover my head, my feet are freezing, and if I cover my feet, my head is exposed. Can I please have a bigger one?" The old man, who had lived alone on the hillside for many years and had a reputation for his clever solutions, pondered for a moment. With a twinkle in his eye, he said, "Why don't you cover your head with the blanket and let me handle your feet?" Perplexed but trusting, the young woman agreed. She pulled the blanket over her head as the old man picked up a long stick and approached her feet. Gently, he tapped her toes, startling her. She instinctively pulled her feet back under the blanket. "There you go," the old man said with a satisfied grin. "Now, the rest of the night is between you and the blanket. I'm no longer responsible. I've done my part." A government employee, bored out of his mind, decided to rummage through his old filing cabinet to kill some time. While sifting through the contents, he stumbled upon a dusty brass lamp he'd never noticed before. This will look nice on my mantel," he thought, and took it home. Later that evening, as he polished the lamp, a genie suddenly appeared in a cloud of smoke. The genie boomed, "You have awakened me, O master. I grant you 3 wishes." Excited, the government clerk wasted no time. "All right," he said, "I'd love an ice-cold Coke right now." Instantly, a frosty bottle of Coke appeared in his hand. He took a sip, refreshed and ready to think more clearly. For his second wish, he said, "I want to be on a tropical island surrounded by beautiful women who find me irresistible." In a flash, he was lounging on a pristine beach, gorgeous women all around, smiling and gazing at him. Feeling bold, he declared his final wish, "I wish I'd never have to work again." Poof! Instantly, he found himself back at his government office desk. A man takes a trip to the desert and, during a solitary walk, stumbles across an old lamp buried in the sand. Thinking it might be worth something, he brushes it off, and to his astonishment, a genie bursts out in a puff of smoke. "I will grant you 1 wish," the genie declares, "but you must choose wisely. Your options are these. You can become the richest man in the world, the most popular person alive, or the wisest man on earth." The man thinks for a moment and replies, "Well, money can't buy happiness, and popularity just makes you a prisoner to others' expectations, but wisdom is eternal. I choose to be the wisest man in the world." "Very well," says the genie, snapping his fingers. There's a flash of light, and the man's face takes on a calm, thoughtful expression. He sits down, stroking his chin, and after a long silence finally speaks. "I should have taken the money." 3 friends, a Scotsman, an Englishman, and an Irishman, are walking along the beach when they stumble upon an old lantern. Curious, they pick it up and poof, out pops a genie. "You each get 1 wish," the genie announces. "That's 3 wishes in total." The Scotsman speaks first. "I come from a long line of fishermen. My father was a fisherman, his father before him, and so on. I want the oceans to be full of fish for all eternity, so my family will always thrive." The genie nods, snaps his fingers, and poof, the oceans are suddenly brimming with fish. Next, the Englishman steps up. "I'm a proud Englishman, and I want a wall built around England to protect her. Make it strong and impenetrable so nothing can get in or out." The genie waves his hand, and poof, a massive wall surrounds England. Finally, it's the Irishman's turn. He rubs his chin thoughtfully and asks, "This wall around England, tell me more about it. How big is it?" The genie replies, "It's 150 feet high, 50 feet thick, and completely surrounds the country. Nothing can get in or out." The Irishman grins. "Brilliant. Fill it with water." A husband and wife in their 60s were approaching their 40th wedding anniversary. Knowing his wife's love of antiques, the husband gifted her a beautiful old brass oil lamp. As she unwrapped it, a genie suddenly appeared. "Thank you for freeing me," the genie said. "In return, I will grant each of you 1 wish." The wife thought for a moment. "I wish for an all-expenses-paid, first-class, around-the-world cruise with my beloved husband." Shazam! Instantly, tickets for a luxurious journey appeared in her hands, complete with extravagant side trips, fine dining, and shopping sprees. The husband, grinning slyly, said, "I wish for a companion who's 30 years younger than me." The genie smiled and nodded. Shazam! Suddenly the husband was 93 years old.